All right, well, welcome back to our Good and Beautiful Life series. We are in week 9. This is video 9, and today we are learning to live without avarice. Now, avarice is tricky. It gives us the false narrative that things will bring us happiness. Things will bring us happiness. You know, as I've been reflecting on the first few phases within the pandemic, how a lot of us were left at home without being able to go to work, and we couldn't go anywhere. A lot of us ended up, if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of us jumped on to our phones, onto our computers, our devices. Some of us turned on the shopping channel, and we were just able to shop. We went online, we started seeking for things that we could buy. Ultimately, this was the only way we could buy things for a time, right? That was how we bought our groceries, how we bought clothes, how we bought the bare necessities. But because of the pandemic, because we lost the boundaries that we once had, where we had to physically get into a car or drive to a location in order to buy something, all those boundaries went out the window. And because everything became so accessible, we just naturally gravitate towards this idea of going on our phone, looking for things to buy. And with just a tap of a button, a few clicks, we were able to buy it and have it sent to our home, straight to our doorstep. It just became so easy. I was having a conversation with a neighbor, and she was talking about how all the different things that she was able to buy just that day, and the entire conversation just became about all the things that we bought. You see, consumerism feeds us the lie that what we buy, how much we spend for it, what kind of brand we buy, the place that we buy from, will give us some kind of sense of security and success. Will promote that we are successful based on the brands we buy or the places that we buy from, the quality of the items that we get, how much money we spend for these items. All of it promotes this idea of success, security, and promotes some sense of happiness. And so we think, Curtis, yeah, I buy things, but I don't find security or success or power in toilet paper. And that makes sense. You know, is the bare necessity toilet paper? Absolutely. But what kind of brand of toilet paper do you buy? You know, Charmin is much more comfortable than the no-name brand or whatever toilet paper you get. You know, choosing one over the other, either way, they both, whichever brand you get, they both do the exact same thing. They function in the same way. They always end up in the same place. And yet somehow we convince ourselves, because one is more comfortable than the other, we're going to go with that one. Somehow we feel that we are above the scratchy no-name one. We want comfort, security. We have enough money. We are successful enough to get this one that we don't have to suffer through the no-name one. And so avarice peeks its head not necessarily just in the items, but where we shop, what store we go to, how much we spend for a particular item, and what kind of brands we buy. And so avarice is the excessive desire for money and materials. It's a little different than greed. You see, greed is the desire for more of what is needed. Avarice is the greed for more money and more materials. And so Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount, counters this world narrative that things will bring us happiness. And so in chapter 6 of Matthew, starting at verse 19, Jesus says this: "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon." Now, perhaps your translations has at the end there that you cannot serve both God and money. And indeed, the word mammon does mean, it can be translated as money, but it's a bit more than that. It is treasure, it is wealth. And it could be used, and typically was used in the first century, as a spiritual wealth. It was never used in a negative context until Jesus comes and switches things up. He says you cannot serve both God and mammon. All of a sudden, Jesus sees mammon as a negative, which is not something that was heard of in that time. And so really what Jesus is doing is he's seeing mammon as a rival god. That what we put our trust in, what we put our dependence in, rivals the dependence we are to have in God. And so we might think, buying the bare necessities like toilet paper or, just having appropriate clothes for our work or for just life in general, or having food on the table, we don't think of these things as big deals. But when we start to depend on those things more than our dependence on God, when we try to reserve these things for ourselves simply so that we know that we are good and can survive and refuse to share with others, that is where our materials, that is where our avarice starts to take over our devotion to God. And so Jesus' kingdom economics begins to shift our thinking. The kingdom narrative is that God will protect and will provide for me and mine, which means I am then freed to use the resources that God has given me in order to pursue the furthering of his kingdom. To be able to use these resources that God has given me in order to promote, to advance the kingdom in the world around me. And so whereas advertisers, prey on the public and they intentionally target and market certain products to each generation, and we're constantly bombarded by all of these different things that are promising if we buy them, they will make us happy, they will make us successful, they will give us security. All of that is distracting us from the one secure place that is absolute, the security we have in God. And so our practice today in order to counter avarice in our life is a de-accumulation. And so what the challenge is for this week is to think of 5 items that we have around our house. And I'm not talking about the junk that we have or the old clothes that we've been meaning to get rid of, and this is providing us an opportunity. But I want you to think of 5 items that you have that you find value in, but that you don't need. You find value in it, but you don't need. And I want you to think of someone who could find even more value in it than you do. This is a tricky thing because we're not just giving away, and then what I want you to do is I want you to give those items to the people that you think of. Again, I don't want this to be a spring cleanup in the summer. A summer cleanup is not an opportunity to get rid of our junk. It is to think intentionally, with purpose, with thought and deep care and love. So the items that we have that we know ourselves we don't need it. Maybe it's something we really, really value, but we know that someone else could really benefit from it. And so to give that gift to that person. And the purpose of this is to get into that framework, get into that frame of mind where God is the one who provides for everything that we need. That we don't need to cling to these things. Some of us have an easier time of doing that than others. Some of us can easily give things away because we don't feel that dependence on our stuff. Others of us really struggle with that. We cling on to everything because everything has meaning to us. We have memories that are tied to each of these things, and so it may be harder for some of us than others. Nevertheless, when we engage in this kind of practice, we open our hearts up to receive from God the various blessings that he has for us. And sometimes by de-accumulating, we find freedom, we find peace, we find joy. Because we're no longer tied to these materials. We're no longer tied to the need of things. But we let go of it. And that gives us freedom then to pursue God and to be in need of him. So may you go, may you have blessing, and may this be a fruitful week for you. Take care, and we'll see you next week.